All right, let's talk about the majorities as we're watching this infrastructure bill essentially being dismantled in front of our eyes. Stephanie Murphy, who are the other two on this committee that basically crushed the prescription drug bill in committee?
Yeah. I mean, well, it came out in a tie in the vote, right? Is that correct?
Is that what it was?
Yeah, and so it's temporarily nixed, but it's not dead. And especially because I think it would be $700 billion in the pay-fors that this kind of Democrat is exactly primed to accept and think is very, very excellent.
Kurt Schrader of Oregon, Scott Peters of California, Kathleen Rice.
That's Kathleen Rice is the one who narrowly defeated Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for this very committee seat.
Right.
And that was because leadership interfered or tipped the scales or made their preference known, etc. And so, like, you know, sometimes we'll have these conversations with other people on the left about, oh, committee seats, who gives a crap, right? That doesn't matter. No, this is why that matters. Like, that kind of voice versus Kathleen Rice would have made an enormous difference here.
Where is Nancy Pelosi? Oh, I know where she is. She's in England.
She's at the Chatham.
I'm sorry. She's at the Chatham House talking about how she has Republican friends. I mean, why isn't she back in Washington essentially saying, Kathleen, right now in New York Democrats are deciding what seats are not going to exist. Well, I don't know if it's possible for your seat not to exist, but it's possible. Or at the very least, we can make your seat in such a way that, like, you know, you're going to have a primary candidate challenger. Like, where is this hardball for these people? Like, this is, and if she, you know, like, look, there's two answers. One is like, she's feckless, which I find hard to believe. The other is that she doesn't really care about this stuff. And I guess, you know, the point is like, I am now in a position where I am rooting for the progressives to sink all of it. Like, no bipartisan infrastructure bill. Like, really sink, you know, like that's where this seems to be headed, it seems to me. And this has got to be on Pelosi and the conservative corporate wing of the party.
Well, I'm not quite there with you yet. I feel as if we're watching, you know, they always call it sausage making or whatever. And I don't actually feel like I don't have a firm grasp on where this is or where it's going. My suspicion is, and I think I told you this before, I think we talked about this last time I was on. My suspicion is that the 3.5, and part of this is because I sort of trust Bernie Sanders on this, and he seems to be a little bit more sanguine than I might expect him to be. I mean, there's always a kabuki dance going on when they're doing these big negotiations. I mean, remember in Obamacare, it went on for months and months. I mean, it was unbelievable. In a big package like this, it's that's so hugely consequential. Everybody plays these different roles, and you just don't know how much of it is kabuki and how much of it is real, other than people like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and Kathleen Rice. Those people, I think, are playing roles very, very sincerely, trying to, you know, destroy the good parts of the bill. I mean, that's obvious to me. The rest of it, I'm not so sure about Pelosi and the rest. But one thing I do think is that, you know, Bernie Sanders, we know for a fact that this 3.5 trillion number isn't real. That number is the cost. Chris Hayes was talking about this on his show last week. 3.5 trillion is the cost, but they've got all these other, they've got tax hikes in there. They've got this drug bill. There's a lot of things that are in there that also raises revenue in other ways. So it's not 3.5 trillion. It's substantially less. So that's a number that was put out there and very ostentatiously put out there by Bernie and various other people that, you know, you don't, I mean, maybe he's out there going, look how much money we're spending, but I honestly don't think that was the point. It strikes me as possible, and maybe I'm wrong here, but that number was put out there for the actual purpose of allowing people like Manchin and Sinema and Rice and others to be able to say that they whittled it down to the number that it actually is. And that when you start looking at this, and this is all very arcane kind of, we don't know what the CBO is going to say and parliamentarians going to weigh in and all that stuff. So I'm just putting that out there as my hopeful, optimistic take that there's more here than what we see, which is that the corporate Democrats are basically going to destroy everything good in the bill, and it's going to end up being one of those things where they say to the progressives, well, what about the child tax credit? How can you possibly vote against that? Right. Even though they've lost everything else in the bill, which is always the threat and the hostage taking with progressives. It's what happened with Obamacare. The main reason why the progressives gave up that fight, and they were in the same position as you just described now, we're going to take down the bill. People came to them and said, look at the Medicaid expansion. You cannot vote against that. You'll never have another chance to expand Medicaid for poor people. And the progressives sort of gritted their teeth and went along. So here we are again in that same situation. I am just maybe hopeful that there's more to this. Would you have Bernie Sanders as the head of the budget committee? You have, other progressives much, much stronger than they were in 2009 and 2010 in the House, with a big coalition that actually has some real clout and some people leading it that are saying, hey, we're not going to fall for your crap again. I'm just hopeful that they have gamed this out enough to avoid that situation again. But again, I don't know. And it's intensely frustrating because just on a political basis, having the fight this way is destructive.
Absolutely.
Because you see a Kathleen Rice come in and make her big, or Manchin walk around going, oh, they're these, the hippies are spending too much money again. The socialists are taking over. All that does is feed into this radical right critique of the Democrats. They don't, I don't know who they think they're helping here, except I think
themselves.
We know that they're helping, their big money donors.
All right, let me just sort of just on that $3.5 trillion number. The point being that if you raise $2 trillion in taxes or in savings, that the expenditure of new money, I guess, or is only 1.5 trillion, just as an example. But in fact, the resolution says you can borrow up to $1.7 trillion. That's the organizing resolution of the reconciliation bill, without getting too arcane, I guess, in the process. But really, ultimately, it's what we're talking about redistribution. We're talking about redistributing money. So it doesn't, the whether it is, money that is borrowed, which I suppose one could argue would have more of a stimulative effect in some level, but it's not like we need the economy to be stimulated. The economy is fairly well stimulated, it seems to me, to the extent that it can be with COVID. I would like to see, expansion of unemployment and et cetera, et cetera. But that, again, if you have $3.5 trillion worth of taxes or savings or whatnot, it's really just a question of redistribution. And it seems to me that, we are watching that redistribution be attacked. The prescription drug bill thing is really is a big issue because it's $600 billion. I think Emma made the point or $700 billion of where the funding for the other things are going to come. And you're attacking drug makers. You're taking from them. You're also, when you use that money to provide Medicare coverage of, let's say, dental, you're pissing off the dentists because they're like, hey, wait a second. I'm used to this 65 and older crowd coming in and, doing the porcelain veneers and doing all this stuff. And I make a lot of money that way. And if Medicare comes in and says, hey, wait a second, with all due respect to the dentist too, like I have some real questions. Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.